Hello and welcome to Voices of Enablement by GTM Buddy, an interview series focusing on the key issues affecting the enablement community today. It's a tough market right now. Organizations are cutting staff, pausing investments into their go-to-marketing department. How do you make a compelling case for the value of enablement is a core question that we are seeking to answer. So our guest today is Nick Salas. He's currently leading global revenue enablement at Sirion Labs. Welcome, Nick. Pleasure having you on the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for asking me to participate. Yeah, very important topics I think you guys are covering, so it's good stuff. But yeah, as mentioned, my name is Nick Salas. I lead the global revenue enablement function at Sirion, and I was hired to come in and really bring some structure to the enablement strategy for Sirion for all the go-to-market, our customer teams primarily, where enablement has really not existed a lot in the past. To bring some rigor and some structure to it. So it's a big responsibility, but luckily there's a lot of overlap with the customer facing enablement that can be that all teams should be on the same page about. So I've been doing enablement since 2016 was my very first enablement role, and I got into it from I was a quota carrying sales rep before that in software, and before that I was doing I was selling, I was in electrical distribution, so a little bit different industry, but yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I saw Nick's profile. Nick was an AE for almost 10 years, so obviously he has a vantage point on both the worlds. So he understands the sales perspective as well as the enablement perspective. As I said, I'm really excited for this conversation. Let's get into this. Nick, like you said, it's a very important topic. I think in a time like this, we know these are tough times for the enablement. A lot of layoffs are happening. So the very first question that I want to ask is that how do you elevate the role of sales enablement with the C-suite when many of the support functions are being cut?
Yeah, I really like that question because there's a debate, or not really a debate, but a discussion going through the enablement circles right now about should sales enablement have a seat at the executive level. And I think regardless of where your point of view is on that, I think here at Sirion, I've been asked to report directly into the C-suite, so that's given me a little bit of a different viewpoint on what types of things that the C-suite actually cares about. And one thing that I've learned is training different groups of people is a very episodic event typically, and it's been seen in the past as kind of a one and done, and kind of building lists and making check boxes against different topics of training that people believe that the sales reps need to be enabled on, checking those boxes and then moving on to the next thing is not what the C-suite cares about. And I think we've always kind of known that in enablement, but it's been made even more clear to me through this role and through the reporting structure that I'm in. So I think kind of a long way to answer your question, but I think we have to align with the C-suite on what information they care about, and not only what they care about, but we also, as enablement leaders, need to come with a point of view and inform them on things that they should be thinking about in terms of how we are able to make it measurable impacts on the training efforts of our sales reps and our other go-to-market teams.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a great point on the checklist in enablement. They don't care about the activities that you do. It's more about the organization objectives. Whatever training programs or enablement initiatives that we are taking, are they is there any outcomes to that? So I think just digging down on just particular that part. So like what kind of metrics do you, since you report to the C-suite, and again the expectations are very different. So can you talk to us more on what kind of objection setting or I would say goal setting that you can work on to again elevate your role with the C-suite?
That's a good question. I've always been a big fan of competency frameworks, and you and I have talked about a little in the past, but I think being able to level set and get executive alignment on what the ideal competencies are that make up the type of role that you're trying to hire for, I think is a really important first step, because once you have that competency framework aligned, you can start prioritizing your enablement programs and get stronger support and alignment, because at that point you're not just guessing what the field needs, but you're able to back it up with, with a very structured framework. And, I think a really good way to elevate the enablement role today, when resources are so scarce, and we're trying to build things that frankly we might not be cut out or suited to build. But
Yep.
I think it's taking a really hard stance on competency frameworks and what that looks like for each role that we're supporting in enablement. And if we're able to show that we're having a measurable impact on the competencies that the sales leaders care about,
Mm.
at that point, our department, our function becomes more of a profit center, because we can start linking these revenue generating activities to competencies that we're helping the teams to elevate. So I think that framework is a really, and like in the process of building these frameworks, we're going to find some competencies that frankly we might never get to.
Yeah.
Like but there's always going to be some core competencies that are kind of standard across what all sales leaders are looking to achieve with their teams.
Mm.
That I think on a quarter to quarter basis we should be focusing on to help elevate our role.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is where enablement really comes across as a strategic partner, because rather than running blind initiatives, you are analyzing, okay, what are the competencies that salespeople lack on, and can we drive those behavioral changes? And
Yeah,
once those initiatives that you roll out, and that is where you are able to show the impact, they understand the value of enablement.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really, and this, and all enablement leaders will, I'm sure, will empathize. It's really,
Yeah.
really hard to turn in a sheet of paper at the end of the quarter that has a grade for enablement.
Mm.
Like how did we do, and how can we prove that what we
Mm.
did, making those types of measurable impacts. So I think it's on us, and I think we really need to get creative
Mm.
and create dashboards and data points, and keep making tweaks
Mm.
to really understand what's going to be helpful and impactful for not only the C-suite that I report up into, but
Mm.
for whatever leadership function is aligned to support from an executive level the enablement role.
Mm.
What are those measurable data points and impacts,
Mm.
the lagging and leading indicators that we can start reporting on.
Mm.
I think those are the really important, and we have to figure out all this while still doing our day job,
Mm.
which is building programs, listening to calls, building coaching frameworks, planning QBRs and SKO. So I
Right.
mean, it's a big undertaking,
Mm.
but
Mm.
it's obviously very important, especially in today's day and age where our role is being more scrutinized, and
Yeah.
we really have to prove out that.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot enablement teams do again right in a time like this where selling is tough. I think now more than ever enablement is required. My CEO always says that I think they're not getting the due because of a lot of scrutiny that is happening around. That is
Yeah.
why one of the reasons that we wanted to have this conversation, that can we help, or what can we talk about to help measure the role and elevate the role.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good topic, and I think one thing that's important for us too is understanding, and this was one of the points that you had mentioned
Hmm.
in our previous conversation, which is around, um, how do we balance the time that we're spending, or that we're asking the reps to spend on getting enabled
Yeah.
versus against the time that they're being asked to actually do revenue generating activities, because just like our role in enablement, the sales reps themselves are being heavily scrutinized on their
Hmm.
performance. So,
Hmm.
which makes it even more important for us to communicate the value of these programs, and prove to the sales reps, prove to these teams that
Hmm.
these activities are worth their time, that they're going
Yeah.
to help move the needle, that they're going to have measurable outcomes, because otherwise we're just seen as an extension of the training department, and
Yeah.
we have to differentiate ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that is where this is the second question. Until they clearly know what this will bring, the change that will bring, they will just think of it as a chore to do, or just any other training program. And one thing that I've
Right.
heard from all the enablement leaders, that you can only do so much. There's a lot of dependency on the frontline sales managers to drive the adoption of those initiatives. If that is not happening, the outcome will not come. So can you
Right.
talk to us more on what kind of goal setting that you do with the frontline sales managers, so that the end users, they take this training or the enablement initiative seriously, so that you get the outcome that you want to get by rolling out all these programs.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the most important things is involving the frontline sales manager in the
Mm-hmm.
content,
Mm-hmm.
in the actual training content. So,
Mm-hmm.
instead of making assumptions or
Mm,
building content that may not that in against areas where the sales reps might not need content,
mm-hmm,
is that's not a good approach. So I
mm-hmm,
think our whole role in enablement, one of our core responsibilities is understanding the needs of the teams that we serve, and we can only understand those needs if we have legitimate conversations, and we can have data to kind of help support that. But
mm,
one of the things I've always been very adamant about is involving the frontline sales manager in the actual process and creation of the content. So whether it's them taking an active role in the actual training portion, or
mm,
whether they're just kind of the subject matter expert and they're advising on the content. But and a lot of times what I found too is they have folks on their team
mm,
who may excel in a certain competency or skill
mm,
area that they can have on and bring in support. And then when you kind of start creating this ecosystem of internal trainers, internal SMEs, that you're kind of having the frontline manager act as an advisor,
yeah,
as kind of a training committee, if you will.
mm,
um, then it becomes more of their voice and less of enablement's voice,
mm.
and the buy-in and adoption tends to go up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. And again, right, they can, because they connect with the sales team day in and day out, so the reinforcement can happen. And you mentioned a great point about some of the sellers being maybe great at one or two competencies. So how do you lean on them, right? Can you talk to us more on some of the reps that excel at particular competency? How do you rely on them to roll out your initiatives?
Yeah, so I think it's important to create to create a culture of
Mm,
openness,
mm,
and of crowdsourcing and kind of brain sharing knowledge. And
mm,
I think one of the challenges that we're faced with in enablement, especially those of us who are enabling global teams,
mm,
is that the team over in Asia Pacific might be excelling, and the things that they're doing
mm,
are really helping them to excel. And the North
mm,
America team, for example, has absolutely no idea what they're doing to be so successful.
yeah.
And so I think creating that culture of bringing the teams together and making everybody kind of feel like one united sales team is a
Mm,
really important. So in almost every training, in almost every enablement program
mm,
that I run, I try to bring on um, a, a sales rep who has had success in that area and can speak to their peers, because
mm,
that always lends a lot more credibility than
yeah.
the enablement person talking, because it could be viewed as theoretical, or well, in this hypothetical situation that this enablement person is conjuring up. But if you can take actual sales scenarios,
Yeah.
and then you can apply it to the rep who actually moved through that sales process, and talk through
Mm.
the competency, it has a lot more impact.
Yeah, yeah, and I think salespeople do love the recognition and the limelight, and can we lean on them? I have seen this, enablement teams reaching out, hey, that this is the deal that you closed. Can you talk to the peers that how did this particular competency help it, and then it automatically drives those initiatives.
Yeah,
So
yeah, 100%. Yeah.
yeah, great. So the other question, Nick, I have is again in a lot of especially in India that I talk to, enablement is not as mature as probably in the West. They still think of enablement as just the onboarding or training, but we all know that is not enough. So
Mhm.
and I think in a time like this when you're not hiring a lot of reps, so what kind of enablement initiatives can you provide to the tenured reps?
Yeah, I really like that question, because um, we're not focusing a lot of our time on keeping the onboarding program up
Mm,
to date.
yeah.
That's always, for an enablement leader, that's like always in the back of our minds, is our onboarding up to date. But like you said, right now is not, at least for me, for us here, it's not as huge of a priority as it has been in the past. And
Mm,
so, I think, for the tenured reps, a lot of what they want to be enabled on is process,
mm,
because there's always skills that they can work on, that they can enhance.
mm,
But a lot of times it's how can you, as an enablement leader, how can I help these tenured reps get their deals done faster?
mm,
Because a lot of them have the kind of baseline competencies to
mm,
drive the sales conversations, and the demos and discovery and the competition and objection and all that.
mm,
um, but from my experience, it's become more of like, help me remove these roadblocks. by building processes and bringing teams together so that there's alignment on what the rules of engagement are, so that I can get this deal done and through the door. So a lot of it just becomes, breaking down internal barriers and red tape, by building processes, enabling all the teams on what those processes are and what they should be. And the tenured reps will love you for it.
Yeah. No, I think because once you're 3-4 years in the system, obviously there's always scope to learn, but I think the process side, if we can make it smoother for them, because I think once a team grows, we know there is a lot of, with the deal desk, with the contract signing team, and then the solution consulting team, CS team, there goes a lot. And sometimes you wish that, okay, we are also selling internally. You are trying to get all this stuff, done just to, get this contract easier. So I think if we can make that process simpler, like you said, they love you for that.
Yeah, totally. And that's not to discredit the other, like we need to be enabling them on product and, any changes to our messaging and our ICP and, those are all very important skills too. So I don't want to discredit those, but they typically can be enabled on those areas quicker because of their tenure. So it becomes more about, what we talked about, which is removing any friction from the sales process.
Yeah. Got it. Nick, one other question that I think, again, I speak to, everybody speak about this, that the forgetting curve, right? You train them and then you forget people forget the information. Every enablement person wants to work on the reinforcement of the knowledge to drive the knowledge retention, because if that is not happening, the outcomes will not happen. So can you talk to us more on some of the reinforcement initiatives that you do? How do you ensure that that it could be through the frontline sales manager, it could be through the tools that you use. So can you talk to us about the reinforcement process?
Yeah. I love talking about reinforcement because I don't think it's done enough. At least for me, it's not. I don't do it enough as much as I should. But what I think a really important strategy to include in any enablement program is coaching, and the coaching. We in enablement, we can train on content, we can deliver exceptional programs. But if we go back to the kind of the 3 pillars of knowledge, skills, and behavior, it's really the behavior where we can understand whether or not that knowledge is being retained and executed in the field. And really, those frontline managers are the closest to these reps. And if we can build kind of this culture of, like listening and engaging with in-field activities, then we can understand in enablement how the content and programs are being applied. And then, for me, that really helps build the reinforcement strategy, which is, if we did something initially and it didn't stick, or it did stick, what went right? What can we double down on? Or what went wrong and what do we need to kind of reinforce? But, there's this whole concept of spaced reinforcement, which is, delivering small chunks of knowledge over spaced extended periods of time. I think that's really effective. But, the way I think about it is more along the lines of, well, how can I just listen to what they're doing and see and kind of dissect their process and look to see if the message is being delivered accurately, if the objections are being handled, if the competition is being framed in the correct, all the things that we do, right? That's kind of the approach I like to take.
Yeah. And I think if we look at it, it's kind of the foundation of everything that we're trying to achieve. Like you said, the behavioral change will not happen if they're not retaining the knowledge. And if that is not happening, we'll not be able to show the value of those initiatives or the outcome of those initiatives. So I think in that process, it becomes very critical that they retain all the knowledge that we have given them, or all the training that we have given them, which is tough. But again, can we do more of those reinforcement programs?
Yeah, and again, I'll bring this up again, which is partnering with the frontline manager. Can we help them? Can we provide them a structure to help them coach, so that they can see that the reinforcement is happening, and so that we in enablement can start seeing that competency progress, in areas where it needs to progress.
Yeah. Nick, I have to ask, a lot of people say that, okay, collaborating with frontline sales manager is not easy. It's really like selling internally, that okay, why we want your reps to do this, go through this training probably at this time of the quarter, because they always want to make sure that sellers are spending more time in selling. So can you talk to us more on the metrics that you talk about, or the outcomes that you spoke about? Okay, what is usually your narrative when you are having a conversation with the frontline sales manager on why this particular training or initiative is important?
Yeah, you know, one of the thing one thing I've noticed about frontline managers is they're not short of opinions.
Mm.
So it just becomes a matter of extracting those opinions. But most sales managers I work with, they can always kind of speak anecdotally to things that their sales team is not doing.
Mm.
They don't always have hard data or dashboards or whatever to back it up, but they spend enough time with their individual contributors, and they kind
Mm.
of know, they have a really good sense of, like, my reps need help in value selling. Like,
Mm.
we need to do enablement on selling to value.
Mm.
And I think what the important part about partnering with frontline managers is to deliver content that's relevant to what their individual contributors are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So
Mm.
it's taking the kind of genericized, hypothetical type of training, which is, that can be essentially applied to any organization,
Mm.
and it's making tailored use cases
Mm.
for the frontline manager. And again, going back to, involving them, which is like, give me a specific scenario, that we
Mm.
need to, that we should build this enablement around. And then
Mm.
let's find some internal subject matter experts, or if that's yourself, or if you want enablement to take it on, we
Mm.
can do that. Let's target those specific scenarios that you're seeing in your team,
Mm.
and see if we can have an impact there. And then that takes it out of the generic, sales training that's been around for forever,
Yeah.
that has no customized use cases attached to it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that is where enablement again is being a strategic partner, because you're going to the frontline sales manager with a lot of data, because you have all this data. You've listened to the calls. You can tell
Right.
this particular rep is lacking in this particular competency. And that is when you get an easy buy-in from them, that if you're able to improve this particular competency or drive this behavioral change, this is the impact that we'll see in the revenue. And that is all that they care about. So I think it again
Right.
starts from the analyzing the things that you do. Like you're saying, right? Listen to a lot of calls.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have a well thought out competency framework built, then
Mm.
you can start attaching these different areas to competencies. Um,
Mm.
and at the end of the month, the quarter, whatever,
Mm.
the enablement leader can go back to enablement, and we can talk about the time that we spent,
Mm.
targeting enablement programs towards different competencies.
Yeah.
And then, getting an assessment on whether or not that's, those competencies are, if we're trending up and to the right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Awesome, Nick. I think we were able to actually finish this on time. Thank you so much, for you sharing your perspective. That brings us to the end of the show. It was pretty insightful for me, and I'm sure a lot of the other enablement practitioners are going to, like what you spoke about, how to, set those goals with your CRO or with the CEO. Yeah, thanks again. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Yeah.